Howdy. This is the reaction housing system. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is actually show you how a disaster sparked a creative obsession for me. A creative obsession that resulted in a rapid response emergency housing system. That creative spark, of course, was Katrina. Now, 5 years ago, Katrina burned images like this into our brains. The poor souls from New Orleans who were rescued from the floodwaters, packaged up, shipped 350 miles out of state to Houston, Texas, where they were then housed in the Astrodome on a cot. This was their sanctuary, their refuge. All their personal belongings stuffed in plastic bags and crammed under their cots. There's no personal space, no sense of privacy, and no dignity. This really, really upset me. Because see, after a disaster, there are three basic human needs: food, water, and shelter. The first two are handled in ad nauseum with redundancy through various charity organizations, NGOs, and governmental agencies. But where was shelter? Housing was something that we hadn't really considered. So I took this very personally because I grew up just 2 hours north of here. Now, necessity is often said to be the mother of invention. This old adage is never more true than following a disaster. Disasters force us to be creative because they force us to reframe situations. And when I'm talking about reframing, I'm not talking about necessarily the definition of it in the dictionary. What I'm actually talking about is a creative process. The creative process of reframing is simply to look at something from a new perspective, a new vantage point. Katrina forced us to look at a lot of things in a new perspective, both figuratively and very literally. For me, it forced me to reframe my entire design career. See, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an urban planner. I'm actually just a graphic designer. So prior to Katrina, I was designing posters, logos, websites, applications. Wasn't really thinking about anything other than that. Post-Katrina, I started to design like I actually give a damn, to steal Cameron Sinclair's book title. And I have a one-track mind. So seeing that there was no mass housing solution actually in place, I became obsessed with disaster housing. So I looked around to see what existing systems were currently in place, and 5 years ago, all I could really find was a tent. So Katrina survivors were actually housed in a completely ad hoc system of tents, hotels, apartments, even cruise ships, and of course the FEMA trailers. And what most people don't understand about the infamous FEMA trailers is that they actually didn't arrive on scene until about a month and a half after Katrina, leaving people to their own devices. They also can't be stored very effectively in a warehouse. You can't stack these things and store them. So what the government did was actually buy up retail inventory. They actually went out to all the RV dealerships initially and bought out everything they had, ended up paying over 3.5 times the retail sticker on each one of these trailers initially. So these were very slow, ineffective, and extremely costly. So if there was nothing in the present, maybe there was something historically that we could look at as a pattern for how to house people rapidly. So I turned to the Native Americans living on the Great Plains. They followed migratory buffaloes around as their lifestyle. They were nomadic people, which means their shelters had to be extremely portable, quick to assemble, quick to disassemble, and adapted to lots of various terrains and environments. This seemed to be a good pattern to steal, because as designers, we think we're really creative, but we're really just idea thieves. So this was the first idea I stole. So how would you make a modern American teepee? As I was kind of charging myself to do, I absolutely had no idea. So I started to give myself, just like we do with any design process or problem, I gave myself some guidelines. And the first thing I tried to take into consideration is cultural context. Cultural context is something that's often very much overlooked by designers. Would an American audience, a modern American audience, really want to spend time post-disaster in a big pointed tent with soft floors? Another consideration that I tried to take into account was the fact that it's just basic human behavior, right? There's no incentive to maintain anything if you don't have a personal or financial stake in it. So taking these both in here, what I could synthesize out of that as a pattern was actually durability. Durability seemed to be a very prominent need for any kind of mass sheltering system you would devise, which led me to another conundrum. How do you move big pointy tents around and store them efficiently if they're rigid? Comes out there's a company that's actually really good at moving rigid things around. IKEA. You laugh, but they actually pioneered two techniques that has kind of made them so successful, and something that we can now chuckle about, and that was self-assembly and flat packing. by forcing their customers to actually have to assemble the furniture themselves means they could actually take up all the parts of the furniture and pack them up in the most efficient little box possible to ship around. Now, this was a tremendous cost savings to them, right? It dropped their price points on their products down so low that competitors can't even really compete with them. So my initial design guidelines ended up being something that looked like this. I wanted the portability of a TP, some unachievable durability and strength, composed with transportation efficiency and economy. So I had no idea how to do this. So I noodled on this for a few days after Katrina, trying to figure out how in the world would you do this? What immediately came to mind was coffee cups. Now you might be thinking, what the hell does a coffee cup have to do with emergency housing? But if you reframe a coffee cup as shelter and turn it upside down, now you have a two-part shelter system that has a rigid floor, rigid walls, it's insulated, ample living space, and a small footprint. They flat pack, and they're recyclable. So this was the second idea I decided to steal. So I started drawing out 9-foot tall coffee cups with doors, right? Now I'm pretty obsessive. So I couldn't just leave it at that. So the next thing I tried to figure out how to do was to actually embed Murphy-style bunk beds in the walls for a family of 4 to sleep on. But I'm obsessive, so I couldn't just stop at computer drawings or models. So I made my own vacuum form table and took over my wife's oven and started to make a series of models to study different forms and structures. And I'm obsessive, so I made lots of those. So finally, I got so obsessed with this idea and consumed by this idea that it seemed like a really good idea that I started pitching grant funding for it because I actually wanted to build prototypes and prove that this system would work. And after one particularly harsh tongue lashing I got from one chief of staff, I decided to hell with it. I'd build one my own in my backyard. Comes out, running power tools after 10 p.m. at night is a great way to meet your neighbors. And I mean all of them. I met neighbors I didn't even know I had. So I ended up with this, which is a very rapid prototype, value engineered from essentially what I could find at Home Depot and built for about $1,200. Now this actually serves as my test bed for about a year. So I could test out various things. Now, it was actually a functional prototype. It had the bunks actually folded up on the walls. It had lighting. It was climate controlled. So the climate control system was actually something I really wanted to take some time to prototype. So thinking about how you could actually store something long term, you follow the KISS system, right? Keep it simple, stupid. You remove all the mechanical stuff that requires a lot of maintenance. So by leaving power and AC up to third-party vendors on a lease basis, all you really have to worry about is an electrified air duct to connect back to your shelter units. I was calling this an umbilical. So I built it out of RV sewer hose, a space blanket, and a $50 window unit off of Craigslist. It actually worked really well. Our air conditioner went out in the house, and I spent a few nights in it myself. So this all led to my version of the modern American teepee, the EXO housing unit. It's a two-part design that actually can be assembled without tools in under 2 minutes. It comes in, of course, various configurations. You can arrange it. And like the teepee, it's extremely adaptable to any type of terrain. You can deploy it on hard asphalt parking lots, in a pasture. It doesn't really matter. And like our coffee cups and IKEA furniture, you can also stack them. So you get extremely efficient storage and transportation. Actually, transportation is extremely efficient because they fit on a 53-foot semi-flatbed trailer. You can get over 20 units on that, housing 4 people each. So you can see how the numbers quickly multiply over various modes of transit to you at a medium cargo container ship where you can actually move enough units in one shipment to house over 1 million people. That's moving a lot of housing. But it's not just an architectural solution with just this. It's a complete system, taking into account everything from logistics to inventory and asset management software to modular walkways and even pod covers. So this helps us reframe the whole Astrodome scenario. So instead of trying to cram everybody inside in this interior, you can actually use the sea of asphalt around this as living space. And it's not just living space, you can actually have collected small communal nodes. This leaves the interior of these vast complexes to be used for distribution of food and medical services, counseling. You can actually use these facilities to more advantageous purpose. So this is the reaction housing system. It actually doesn't stop here. There's 3 more models that we're working and partnered up, and we're actually going through selections looking for manufacturing now. The point being, Disasters force us to change. There's actually things that we can learn from disasters. A major hurricane hitting a dense population area, it's not the first time it happened with Katrina. It's something that's expected annually. There's actually a 6-month season for it. It happens every year. To that point, 1 month after Katrina, Rita made landfall. Just a few years after that, Hurricane Gustav followed a very eerily similar track, followed just over a week later by Hurricane Ike, the largest Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. This is not New Orleans, this is Galveston, Texas, post-Ike. I'm actually going to show you a quick clip from a documentary that's at least 35 years old that was made in response to Hurricane Camille, which made landfall 36 years prior to Katrina. And I thought there was something really interesting in this.
A pilot flying over the area said it looked as if a giant bulldozer had scraped the countryside flat. 5 years later, they were still repairing the damage wrought by Camille.
5 years later. Katrina's not the first time this has happened. It won't be the last. These happen repeatedly. So from this, we can learn. We can learn what problems keep reoccurring. By learning what problems keep occurring, we can devise solutions. And I don't mean short-term creative solutions that are kind of done off the cuff. I mean permanent long-term solutions. Because by doing these permanent long-term solutions, we can save lives the next time this happens. So my charge to all of us here is to learn, solve, save. If we can learn from the past, learn what problems come up in repetition, come up with a long-term solution for it, then we can be prepared the next time this happens. Thank you.